button?
I hit the button.
Oh.
You can see it. It's recording.
Oh, I see on the screen.
You see how when you talk, it does the little waves? That's your voice.
It does it when you talk, too.
Yes, that's what it's hearing. That's what the...
On from the microphone.
You know. You're a goof. You're a big goof.
We're going to have to start it all over again.
No, we're not. We're not going to start over. We're gonna. This is all staying in. This is all
you
staying
can't keep this in.
I can keep it all in. It's
staying in.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to the next session.
An advice podcast for game masters seeking help with their next game session. I'm Adam Johns.
I'm Alyssa Johns.
All right, what's our first question?
Okay. So we would like to start with the next session help. So this is the question I found because right now our podcast isn't actually live. So no one knows about us. So they're not sending us questions. So I found questions on Reddit.
we plan to record 100 episodes and then put the podcast live.
100 episodes?
No, not really.
No, I don't. I think we said 10.
I think we said 2, but
for live?
Yeah.
Right. Here we go. This question is from Jez Polyps. Or G's Polyps?
Either way.
G's Polyps.
Jeez.
The question is, I had 2 players come to me with the same concept for their characters independently of one another. Should I tell them to try again? They both want to be a tiefling that has disguised racial features to appear human. What's worse is they've both told me that they want this to be a secret from the rest of the party that can be revealed in roleplay, being a big character moment for each of them. Obviously, I find this hilarious, though in truth, I don't want either of them to feel robbed of their moment. Should I tell one of them to knock it off? Or is there a way I can spin this into a great moment for everyone?
Oh man, this is a really interesting situation. Okay, let me preface by first saying that I almost always advise that game masters have encouraged their players to not play the same character classes at the same table. There's a lot of reasons for it, but most specifically the reason is that I don't want my players to feel like they have another player who's stepping on their same toes. This is much more true in kids groups than maybe it is in adult groups, but ultimately, if I have 2 players who are both playing fighters and they're both, the same level of strength and the same level of dexterity, it makes it very hard for me to put in situations where one player can clearly be successful and can clearly be an important and needed part of the group. Imagine that these 2 players, one of them is very, very quiet and the other one is very outspoken, right?
Okay.
And now all of a sudden you really want to pull the quiet player into the game a little bit more. You really want to encourage them to role play a little bit more. But every situation you create that might allow the quiet player to be especially needed in the group or especially successful in the group, all of a sudden gets completely overshadowed by the more outspoken player who jumps on every opportunity. So when imagine they're both rogues and all of a sudden you go, oh, there's a door that needs to be that's locked that you need to pick. And now the outspoken player, because they're also a rogue, jumps in and go, oh, I'll pick that lock and I'll do that thing. And I'll succeed in all those important areas, and the quiet player never gets a chance to do that. So classes are a uniquely interesting way to pull a player out of their shell a little bit and to get them to engage a little bit more in the game.
I could see if I was a character at this table, if I knew that the other person wanted to also be a tiefling, I wouldn't even need them to know. I wouldn't even need to know that they also wanted to appear human. Just if they also wanted to be a tiefling, I would go, oh, well, I don't want to play the same thing as them. I want to be my own person. I'll choose a different race. I'll choose a different, And so there's an opportunity here that the Jez Polyps could say, look, you each want to be tieflings, or you each want to be humans with air quotes. I don't know.
I mean, it does raise the question, right? Even if you came to them individually, you're sort of spoiling the surprise that the other one wanted to do.
Maybe they can say, hey, Jack is now the character, one of the guys. Hey, Jack, someone else in the group wants to do a very, very similar thing. I'm not going to tell you who, because I don't want to ruin the surprise, but you might want to change your character a bit.
I guess it would sort of depend. Like if you had a group of 6, you might be able to pull that off, right?
That's true.
But if you had a group of 4, or a group of 3 even.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it really narrows. Like, I'm clearly going to be able to guess exactly who is doing that. In fact, one of them is a dragonborn, and the other one is human.
Human. Human.
Human. And I'm going to be able to pick it out.
Plus, then you're the person who's choosing who has to choose. That's hard.
Now, I will say this really does present such a great opportunity for role play, right? And for scene. And it is a pretty hilarious scene to imagine. One of them, pulls off their mask or whatever and goes, I'm sorry, everybody. I've been lying to you the whole time. I'm actually a tiefling. And then the other one also pulls off their mask and goes, what? I'm a tiefling too.
Gary?
Gary?
Miranda?
And maybe the real secret to how to do this would be to encourage the 2 players to, like, be aware. The players can be aware without their characters being aware.
Okay.
Like, maybe the characters themselves are actually siblings or are actually related to each other, or actually know each other, but both of them are doing such convincing disguises that they don't recognize the other one for who they are.
Or maybe they're enemies. Maybe they're from different dragonborn clans.
Well, they're tieflings, but...
Tiefling clan.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I've played with a lot of dragonborn, so that's immediately where my mind went. I went silver dragonborn and blue dragonborn, but they're tieflings.
Yeah, sure.
Do tieflings come in different colors?
Sure, why not?
Yeah.
I mean, you can add that into your world.
Yeah.
That's super fun. Or in different clans.
In my world,
different...
dragonborns have kind of this weird Russian accent, and that's exactly what I would do for a tiefling.
Is that just because that's the only accent you can
That
do?
is the only accent I can do.
Yeah. So I do think there's an opportunity maybe here to play out a really interesting story piece. So I might not actually, in this particular case, I might not encourage the game master to tell the players, here's what's going on. But you would really need to carefully line up the reveal so that both players feel like they're part of the scene together rather than one player stealing another player's thunder.
I could see that. I could also see if one tiefling reveals that they are actually a tiefling, and the other person could hold back, could watch what the reaction is. Mm-hmm. And keep up the disguise.
Yeah. Oh, it suddenly occurs to me there's an interesting through line here. Whether or not this is true for the players, I have no idea. But there's an interesting through line here that has to do with coming out of the closet.
Oh, that's true.
And the reveal that sort of happens along with that. And that's actually a pretty common thing in some of the LGBT population, where you watch someone else come out of the closet, or you watch somebody else reveal their true self to family members or to loved ones, mm-hmm. to see how they react.
Yeah.
Or people test the water, right? You watch a show or something where someone comes out of the closet to their parents, and then you sort of turn to your parents and you see what do they do. You ask them, like, what did you think of that show? Or
yeah. So maybe what this game master should do is set up an opportunity for them to come across a band of tieflings, for these 2 players to see how everyone reacts to tieflings. Test the waters with, is there a negative stereotype? Is there a intimidation factor? Is there something for them to role play out that then maybe one of them can say, I'm a tiefling, or they can say, they can hold back and keep that secret for a while.
It might be really interesting to even set up the idea of, like, you had mentioned these sort of tiefling clans or something. Mm-hmm. And I like that idea. Maybe you could do something with that where the tieflings maybe each are from separate clans, and the players are pursuing after those clans for some reason. Maybe the clans are doing terrible stuff, horrible rituals, or they're a cult or something like that. And so then there can be sort of an association that the players have with like, tieflings from this clan are evil, and you could play into that idea, and really, like, make it risky. Make it feel a little risky for the characters to reveal themselves in that situation, which might be very interesting. And maybe doubly so if one of them reveals, if you start to set up the idea that they really are enemies of each other.
Yeah.
I think that could be a really interesting way to play that out. You actually had a similar character concept.
I did. I had a really fun character. I had Wocket, Wocket was my construct, and he was, oh my gosh, he was so much fun to play. He was
a Warforged.
he was a Warforged Wocket, and Wocket Sprocket, I think is what I called him, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and what actually happened is I had a gnome artificer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Gnome artificer character who was operating inside of Wocket as if it were like Iron Man armor, you know?
Or almost like a forklift or something.
Yeah, yeah, so
With levers and
Ellie, the
pulleys
little
and stuff.
gnome, was inside of Wocket and would control him. And Wocket she had a microphone inside of there, and none of the characters knew. And it was just a secret, which was a lot of fun because like we would come up to like rivers, and Ellie had not secured the shell of Wocket to be waterproof, and so Wocket was like, "No, I do not want to go." I don't even think I played it with that kind of.
I don't think you did a robot voice.
I probably did a
just
Russian accent because that's what I do.
Yeah.
Wocket did not want to go in the river, and everyone else was like, "You'll be fine."
All the
Wocket's
players,
like,
all the players are going, but you don't even have to breathe. You can just go underwater.
and Wocket would be like, "Yeah, you're right. I don't need to breathe, but I'm scared of rusting." It was, and then what you would have me do, Adam was the GM in this case, and what Adam would have me do is at night I would have to make repairs on Wocket, and so Ellie would come out of the suit to gather materials and to empty her pee bag because I was assuming that she had some sort of like bucket.
You don't really talk about bathrooms in most D&D games.
Yes, but when you're trapped inside of a robot for 8+ hours, you gotta empty your bag. Anyway, and so she would go gather berries, and she would go get food, and you would have the other players roll random perception checks in the middle of the night. Whoever was keeping watch had to roll random checks to see if they saw Ellie. Because Wocket would just sleep by like powering down and would just be, but she would come out the hatch.
Which was also sort of a joke because the idea that like the robot needed to sleep, the
Right.
Warforged needed to sleep was also sort of a funny joke with the players.
It was a really good, and when the reveal finally happened, it was shocking, I think, to everybody.
Yeah, I think we did a really good job playing it up so that you felt like you were constantly guarding a secret. And that you had to do all this extra stuff in order to maintain your secret, but also making it not quite enough for the players to guess what was going on. Mm-hmm. And there were moments, I think after that session, we even asked everybody if they had figured it out. And I don't think anybody else had figured out what was actually going on.
No one had any clue.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think I remember feeling really exposed because once Ellie was a character, I had not role-played as Ellie. I had role-played as Wocket to the rest of the group. So the rest of the group had like, well, we don't know who this person is. You know, now we don't know who you are. And it felt weird. And after that group, I was the DM next. And I made because Ellie and Wocket were no longer there as a character, I had them go rescue Ellie, which was this weird thing because they had forged this bond with Wocket, but not with Ellie. And what ended up happening in the next campaign is I had the suit was actually some sort of evil.
It had gotten corrupted.
Yeah,
or
the
something.
suit got corrupted, and
Ellie was
writing these letters to everybody, and they were getting weirder and weirder. And I actually wrote the letters out.
Yeah, that was fun.
On distressed paper, that was fun. Anyway, so having that reveal was really awesome and precious to me, you know, and I could see why it would be really hard to have the same concept as someone else.
Right. Imagine that you revealed in that moment and then had one of the other players go, "Oh, I'm the same thing. I'm a fairy inside of a elf
so
suit
this
or
is
something."
really tricky. I think I'm camp tell them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what? I think given all that in mind, I think I am too. I think the conversation I would want to have is I would pull the both of them into a conversation separate from the rest of the group. And I would say, normally, both of you came up with these really interesting character concepts, and normally I would go, awesome, this is so great. But it happens to be the case that both of you came up with the same character concept. Mm-hmm. And here's how we're going to do this. Normally, I wouldn't have revealed it, but I'm going to reveal it in this case and let you have player knowledge that this is what's going on, but your characters still don't know. And then get them to role play out that piece.
Oh, yeah, you would say you can keep your same characters and we have to separate what the players know and what the characters know. Or you have the opportunity to re-roll. But if one of you chooses to continue to be a tiefling disguised as a human, you need to make sure that you are keeping that secret for that other player.
Right. And there is a great opportunity, when you include your players in your role-playing, in your design of the story, you can include them and expect them to roleplay, right? Your characters are actors, essentially, at a table. And so the actors know the end of the plot most of the time. They know what happens in the script. And then they act in a way that goes along and creates a good story. You can ask your players to do the same thing here. They are playing along to make a good story. And so a lot of the times, game masters will sort of try to make a story and set up so that the players will act a certain way, or so that they'll play out a certain interesting scene, but they won't include the players in the setup of that or in the expectation of it. And as a result, the players make different choices than what the game master was intending. And that's okay. Sometimes that's the fun of the game. But if you really want to set up a really dramatic scene or a really interesting reveal, sometimes it's much better to have your players on board with it, and make it clear to them to say, like, here's the scene we're going to play out. Let's all do this together, and we can all contribute to it together. And you can even say, here's how this is going to end.
Well, which is what you talked about on the last episode. You
Right.
said, if you say, look, here's the scene we're going to play, it ends with you guys agreeing to work together, and you're going to agree to a venture together. But right now you're at odds. So let's start there, knowing that we're working towards you're going to end this scene with you're working together. I think that's super effective.
Oh yeah,
it's super effective.
That's very, yeah, absolutely. The Pokemon technique.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the real secret here is that you don't need to hide everything from your players. You want the plot to be a surprise, but you also want your players to be a part of the creation of the story. And I don't totally think that's worthwhile. And in this case, I think there's a great opportunity to basically, like, ask your players to act a little bit, and pretend. And there may be a great opportunity for both the players to be in on this sort of joke that's going on, where one of them goes like, yes, I'm human. And then the other one goes, yes, me too. I'm human. Would you like a human handshake with me? Yes, of course. I would love to extend a human handshake. And they're both like, jiving off the same thing, and everybody else is just looking at them like they're a bunch of weirdos, and doing something really strange.
It's funny if they're the only humans in the group,
right?
Then everyone could be like, humans,
humans. Don't make fun of us humans. We don't like that. We get all red in the face and we get really angry about it.
We need to discuss ways to shave time off of our adventure. How can we go a slightly faster route?
Let's talk about traffic with carts.
Whoa.
So I think that there's a great opportunity to like have them both in on a joke that the rest of the party's not yet in on, but that everybody's sort of role playing out in a really fun way.
Awesome. Okay, so should we go to a break or should we go to our next question?
Sure, we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back.
All right. We're back.
Helps if we unmute the mic.
Okay, we are back with another question for the next session help. This one is a little bit more vague, I guess. It's not as specific. So this one is, how do you plan out the plot of your homebrews? What processes do you have? Processes?
Oh, man.
What process do you have?
Okay, this is a big question because I do a lot of homebrew.
Well, first of all, this is from user Voxit.
Oh, thanks, Voxit.
Yeah. Good question.
So let's start off with a couple of sort of ground rules about your homebrew. You need to decide how much and how little of your world is allowed to be adjusted. For instance, some people get really tied down into like their Dungeons and Dragons lore of like how the world was created or the gods that exist in the world. That's okay, so long as your players are also on the same board. But it may be, if you're going to have some strict rules around that, it may be important to sort of communicate that to your players and say, I want to stick to the D&D pantheon, or I want to stick to the world creation that we have here, or to the way magic works. Those are some strict boundaries that I want to set. That being said, there's a lot that you can do with your homebrew. I find that it is way easier to be creative in a framework than it is to be in an open slate.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's the difference between a huge open page or like, here's where I'm starting at.
Prompts help a lot. And when I'm creating a brand new homebrew world, I actually really struggle with what kind of plot do I want to do? What kind of direction do I want to go? And a lot of that is because I don't really know what the players want. I don't really know what sounds interesting to everybody. And even if I can say I want to do a Back to the Future plot, or I want to do a plot like Lord of the Rings, I want to take it from media that I have seen, it's still really difficult to make something from scratch.
What I tend to do is I tend to go big and broad and then narrow down.
Which is a good way to go.
Yeah, I like to go, okay, what is the world? Where are they in the world? What is, and then you just kind of narrow. And then you get your players involved.
The other way that I do it is that I really prefer collaborative homebrew, which is where you do homebrew along with your players. And one of the methods that I use for this, that we actually use at Game to Grow, and that was actually co-created with a couple of friends of mine, Zach and Bobby. And what this is called the rumor system. And the way the rumor system works is that you have each player present a rumor to the group. And the rumor contains some certain bits of information. And then the players are going to vote on which rumor they think sounds the most interesting. It's basically like, here's a bunch of plot lines, and the players get to vote on which plot line they want to pursue.
And I think we're going to have Zach on at some point to talk about this more.
That's probably true. So I'll give a really cursory overview, but I won't really explain how we came up with it or anything like that. The way the rumor system works is that each player comes up with a thing that is happening in a place and a reason why the players or the characters care about that thing. So this might be, there's an ogre attacking the town of Moxie. And we care because the mayor is offering a reward for anybody who can stop the ogre. So we care because of money. And that could be a totally reasonable plot. And everybody creates their own set of rumors. And then all the players come together and vote on it. And the conceptualization of it in-game is essentially like you're in a city and you're all hanging out in a tavern. And you go, boy, we need another job. We're running out of money. We got to go find some work. And then everybody leaves the tavern and goes off on their own in the city to go find out, like, what's going on in the world where we might be able to, like, do some good or find some money or find something that's interesting to us. And then everybody comes back to the tavern and says, here's what I found. And they found some little bit of rumor that exists out in the world.
And then they vote on it.
Right.
So in this case, you go from, you have rules about where you are in the world, what kind of rules aren't going to be changed in your world. And then you have the players make their characters. And then you come to the first session and do the rumors.
Yeah. I don't like to do rumors on the very first session. And the reason for that is that I want to get players playing as quickly as possible. They have their characters. I want them to start playing some stuff. I might do that if I had a group of friends and players that I have known for a long time. You know, we took a break for a summer or something and we came back and wanted to do a new plot line. Mm-hmm. In that case, I might do rumors on the first session right after they'd made characters. But if I had a group of brand new players that I was just sitting down with for the first time, I probably wouldn't want to do rumors with them because I would want to get them up and running and into a storyline, even a short one that we run for, you know, just a couple of weeks or a one-off, to get them into their characters and playing along with it rather than trying to jump in and do a bunch of collaborative world building to start off.
Okay, well then when do you do the rumors? Because, you know, you're trying to plan out a homebrew session.
So if I was planning out a homebrew session, what I would start with is a half a plot. So in this case, I might do something like have all the players at the end of a plot line as if they already knew each other. So then Imagine all the players are already on an adventure. They already did all the investigation. They're finally at the final moment where they're fighting the troll with a metallic jaw. And he is called Trolljaw, and you are defeating him in his cave after clearly investigating and finding him all the way down here, and he's been terrorizing a town. And you're in the middle of the fight and have everybody start at half health, and the troll starts at half health, and you start in a combat with the troll.
Well, that's awesome. I think that's really cool, because then you get the opportunity to use your like spells and your attacks right away, and you get to feel like, oh my gosh, I have to figure out what I'm doing with this character and how this character, and then you kind of like are in that moment.
Right. And then you can totally like finish up the combat. You defeat Trolljaw, and then you bring the evidence of Trolljaw's defeat back to town, and you hand it over to the mayor, and he gives you each 25 gold apiece, which is what he agreed on in the first place, even though the players were never a part of that negotiation.
Yep.
And now you're all celebrating in the tavern, and now you go and search for your rumors.
Okay. See, that's so you do rumors on the first session.
I would, but I wouldn't make it the first thing.
Right. I like that. I tend to use I tend to get too detailed too quickly. I try not to railroad my players, but I tend to get way too detailed too quickly, and I like think of all of these things that I have to do, and I have to get ready, and I have a hard time letting go of that. What I tend to do is I tend to outline as much as possible, and one of the ways I do that is I use Scrivener, which is a book writing program that you can get. You can start off with a free trial. That's actually a really good free trial to kind of get you in the mindset of making an outline, and you can have a tab for your characters and a tab for your NPCs, and I tend to take notes as I go, but I do recognize in myself that I get too wound up in the little details, but it also helps me. I'm a person who really is helped by a module. I like to use even homebrew modules that I find online. I love to use modules because it takes a lot of the guesswork out of things. It's not bad to look through a module to get an idea of what your homebrew could look like if you're an outliner like me. So if you need a homebrew of something and you're like, oh, what do I need to look at next? You can look at a module to go, okay, this is kind of the beats that they go through. Here's how I can tweak that just to get used to the idea. And it might take some of that stress off of yourself. And then as the players go, well, I don't want to go to that tavern. I want to go to the library. Then you're like, okay, on your feet, gotta improvise. But take some of that guesswork out.
You like having the framework.
I love having the framework. Yeah, I have a hard time with blank open pages. And I do steal from everything. Anything and everything.
That's really okay. One of the things to keep in mind, I've run into some hesitancy giving advice to new game masters where they don't want to steal from TV shows, or they don't want to steal from movies or from other modules. And I say, steal. You're playing in a game with your friends and you're having a fun time. It might be a different story if you're doing a live stream game or something, or you're writing your own module. Then you don't want to take somebody else's copyrighted works.
Don't profit off of stealing someone's work. That's
right. But
that's douchey.
If you're just having fun with your friends at a table, find a module and find some interesting puzzles or some interesting fights or interesting plot lines from those modules, and take them and make them your own and make them a part of your game. That is one of the best ways to gain inspiration as a game master for what you want to do, is by having exposure to a lot of different things. You can't make up ideas from nothing all the time. Sometimes you have to have some seed, some starting point.
I could see if you don't want to steal from something that is super popular at the time, like everybody you play with plays or watches, I don't know, Game of Thrones, right? You wouldn't want to have the exact plot. Then it wouldn't be as fun. Or you tell them right away, this is going to be a Game of Thrones plot, and now they can buy into it.
Or you let the references be a joke in the whole thing.
Yeah, that's true.
We're hanging out not in Westeros but in Northros. and we're
Easteros?
Easteros, and we're having a great time hanging out in the war torn country of Easteros.
Some raven shows up with 4 eyes.
Whoa! And you just let it be
6
a part of the
eyes.
joke, if you do it that way, you can also open yourself up to like doing a different twist, because then everybody has an expectation for what's going to happen. This is like telling a good joke. The best jokes have some kind of surprise to them, right? And when you start telling a joke, you set up a clear expectation for the direction the joke is going to go, and then you make a twist on it. And you can totally do the same thing here. We can do Lord of the Rings, and introduce. There's a plain looking ring that somebody has, and they go, "Oh my gosh, this must be like, well, we're clearly doing Lord of the Rings, so this is clearly like the one ring." And then they put it on, nothing happens. And you're like, "Yeah, it's just a plain looking ring. There's no magical property here whatsoever," and go in a completely different direction with some of the rest of your plot. But then you get the moment of that joke and that little reference that clearly everybody got.
Yeah, I like that. I like the idea of having a campaign based off of Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Oh, sure.
But you guys are non-benders.
The whole thing, you're just in a world of people that
Yeah.
that are super powerful magical casters. Yeah. That seems kind of depressing to me, actually.
That's true, but maybe their bending comes halfway through.
Maybe I'm more judgmental than I think to non-benders. That's really
Oh,
terrible.
yeah, that's mean.
Sokka did great.
Sokka is the best.
Yeah, space sword.
Space sword. Okay. I think we should move on to... Now, we've done 2 good questions here, and we have another question for Ask a GM, but I think we should move to use that spell
Alrighty, let's use
to
that
break
spell.
it up a little bit, and then we could do Ask a GM after.
Alright.
What do you think?
Let's do it.
Okay, use that spell.
Ba-da-ba-ba-bow. Use that spell.
Okay, so this is where I, Alyssa, name a spell, and then we discuss different ways to use it. These are just spells that I found at random, and I thought, that's pretty fun. And then I go, I've never heard of this one, and we talk about it. So this spell is Antilife Shell.
Okay.
Antilife Shell is an abjuration, level 5, casting time 1 action, with a range, self-range, 10-foot radius. So
So it's
10 foot
centered on
radius
yourself.
from yourself.
Yeah.
It uses some components, whatever. Concentration up to 1 hour for duration. And here is what it says. A shimmering barrier extends out from you in a 10-foot radius and moves with you, remaining centered on you and hedging out creatures other than undead and constructs. Hedging out creatures. The barrier lasts for the duration. The barrier prevents an affected creature, so undead and constructs. Oh no, anything but undead and constructs, from passing or reaching through. An affected creature can cast spells or make attacks with ranged or reach weapons through the barrier. If you move so that an affected creature is forced to pass through the barrier, the spell ends. This is from the Player's Handbook, page 213, if you're following along.
Sure.
So I find this interesting because you cast this barrier. It's 10 feet, so it's a 10 foot from myself. So someone would have to reach in 10 feet with a weapon to get at me, right? But they could, because they can make attacks with ranged or reach weapons through the barrier. So it seems a little like, I don't know if this is so great. But it can keep people from running up at you. So I could see this being used really effectively with swarms.
Yeah, or creatures like beasts or whatever.
Yeah.
Because they really couldn't get to you. You know, if you're fighting an owlbear or something like that, they
they don't have a 10-foot reach, and they don't have
They
spells.
don't have a 10-foot reach, and they don't have spells. And it says specifically reach weapons. So the idea here is that the life force can't pass through the barrier.
Oh, I guess so.
So a creature, I would rule that a creature with claws, unless the claws were somehow 10 feet long, wouldn't be able to actually get to you, even if they had reach. So even a gigantic creature with claws probably still couldn't get to you.
So are claws not part of the creature then? Are they a weapon?
I would argue to say that the idea here is that it's anti-life. So the question would be, are fingernails and hair alive?
They grow.
They grow, but they grow because they're sort of dead cells that have died.
Gross.
So I would argue that they are not, in fact, alive. The same way that I would say that if you had a polearm that was made of a living tree, it was a spear, but it's made of wood, that it can still pass through the barrier because it's not alive anymore.
Right, it's not attached to the main
Or
tree
if I
anymore.
threw somebody's body at you, that I would argue that also would work.
Because it's a dead body.
Because it's a dead body, and therefore it can pass through the barrier. Because the whole idea here is that it's an anti-life barrier, right?
Can plants go through?
I think I would argue no, not if they were trying to, attack you.
But plants ripped out from the ground could.
Yeah, maybe.
Right, because your tree branch
So it might still be alive.
Right.
Has it died yet?
I don't know. That's a bit hazy. Maybe it starts to go through and falls halfway.
Yeah.
Who knows?
That's a very interesting
swarms.
question. Can I rip a plant out of the ground and throw it through the Antilife Shell?
I mean, it would have to be a dense enough plant,
If I'm like a half giant or barbarian or something, maybe I can just rip a tree out of the ground and knock it at you.
I would just go for coconuts.
Yeah,
coconuts
there you go. Oh man, coconuts, the most powerful weapon.
Okay, swarms.
I think swarms
are really good.
Yeah.
You went through a phase where you used a lot of swarms.
Oh, I love swarms. They're so interesting. 5th edition doesn't really play around with this all that much, but I think it was 4th edition had a bunch of rules about swarms that were very specific. And it was basically attacks that would hit a single target do half damage against swarms, and attacks that would hit multiple targets, like an area attack, do double damage against swarms. And I think that's a very interesting aspect. It changes your tactic. And it means that, spellcasters might be a lot more powerful than non-spellcasters in a lot of situations, but it also means that you suddenly need to completely change your tactic. You're not going to be able to just poke at them with your rapier anymore. That's not going to be effective against a swarm of bees.
Right.
You need to spear one bee at a time with my rapier. But
I got one.
But all of a sudden you could change out what you want to do, and you're not going to use your rapier anymore. Instead, you're going to pick up a big tree branch that's fanned out with lots of leaves and swing that around. That would actually be way more effective than your rapier in that situation. And I like that idea. I like situations that encourage players to be more creative in their approaches.
It was there was a time where it would be let's roll for initiative, and another swarm comes out.
Right.
There's a little rat, and now there's a swarm of rats.
Aha! A swarm of rats. The swarma rats.
The swarma rats. The sewer swarma rats.
Yeah, they just make delicious food.
Well, so Antilife Shell, I could also see you using it. I'm assuming that it's like a kind of a dome bubble. It's
kind of what it looks like.
That's in my head. What I'm picturing is you shoot out like a fountain of Antilife spell magic, and it
from
cascades down like an umbrella. Yeah. It cascades down like an umbrella in a 10-foot radius. So as long as you casted it with your teammates in it, right? Because your teammates couldn't go through.
Oh, interesting. Hedging out creatures. Centered on you and hedging out creatures. No. Your teammates cannot pass through the barrier.
Right.
According to the
So if you were gather to me, and then you cast it, then they could go down, slip down through a sewer that happens to be under your feet.
No. What I'm saying is, based on the wording of this, it would push your teammates out of the area.
No. Ooh, would it? Because it also says if you move so that an affected creature is forced to pass through the barrier, the spell ends.
So the text in the beginning says, a shimmering barrier extends out from you in a 10-foot radius and moves with you, remaining centered on you and hedging out creatures other than undead and constructs.
Oh, so they couldn't.
I think when you cast the spell, it pushes everybody 10 feet away from you.
Oh, man.
Including your teammates, although obviously not affecting you. But if you were to then move and force your teammate to be in the barrier area, then they would be able to enter the area, and it wouldn't affect them anymore.
If you were forcing them to put it, then the spell ends.
Oh yeah, then I guess it ends the spell.
Yeah, if you
that's
move,
a totally good point.
Yeah.
So yeah, you couldn't really do that. You could stand in front of the grate and block a doorway, though.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, you stand in the doorway. So okay. So you can either be got a real dick and be like, everyone for themselves, and I'm in this bubble. It'll be fine. Or you're like, I'll be the one. And you run out to the doorway and you block the doorway from those creatures coming in so that everybody else can escape.
I like the idea, actually. It doesn't seem to say that the barrier would be blocked by walls. So there's a funny idea here that you could close a door and then move the barrier such that it like envelops the door just barely. And then nobody can reach in to open the door handle from the other side because the barrier would be blocking.
They could if they had tongs.
Oh, yeah, I guess that's true. Clearly, the real answer to this is every adventurer needs to bring tongs with them.
Clearly.
I really like that idea. Ha ha!
The ogre pulls out
his trusty set of tongs.
And you have to click it 3 times. Click, click, click.
That's how you do tongs. You always have to click them.
You test that they work. Click, click, click.
Yeah.
Now I can use them.
Open the door handle. The ogre spends 3 rounds trying to open a round door handle with tongs.
With non-grippy tongs.
Yeah, that's the problem. You need grippy tongs.
He needed the silicone ends.
Yeah.
They're removable to clean.
Oh, yeah. The ogres really thought this one
This
through.
has been Kitchen Gadgets with Adam and Alyssa. Okay. Antilife Shell, level 5. I think if I were a wizard, I would add it to my repertoire.
It's a buy.
Yeah.
I consider that one a buy.
It's a buy.
It's a level 5 spell, and all the spells in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons at level 5 suddenly start getting really powerful. There's a lot of really, really powerful spells at level 5 and higher. And there's a turning point, and basically you get level 5 spells when you hit around level 9 or 10, depending on your caster. And it's a really cool turning point for a lot of spellcasters because all of a sudden you get access to some really, really powerful and kind of tactic-changing spells. I mean, this is really like a spell that can vastly change the tactics of a battle. I think that's pretty cool.
Or you say, leave me alone, and you go into your tent and you cast it.
Yeah, that's true. You just use it to keep your friends out.
Aww. Well, here's a question.
I want to sit by myself at a table. I demand to sit by myself.
You go to the tavern.
Oh, this is the perfect COVID-19 social distancing
Antilife Shell.
Antilife Shell.
You go to a tavern and there's no spot to eat, and you make a funny, like you sneeze, and then you cast it under your breath as you sneeze, and then whoo, it pops out, and everyone gets pushed away.
The idea, but it's a shimmering shell. It's not like it's an invisible.
Oh no,
force.
No.
It's like
it's
a clearly
beautiful.
Giant shimmering bubble around you that's preventing people from getting close to you.
Just stick the food on a broom handle and push it into the bubble.
A lazy Susan. Half the lazy Susan's outside the bubble, and then you can kind of.
Oh, brilliant!
Bring it around, yeah.
Lazy Susans and tongs.
Yeah,
we're onto something
yeah,
here.
I think we've solved Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay, this I know we have another question, but this leads me to another question. When you are in a game and you have a spell that has a cast-in time of 1 action, and you're not in combat, do you let people use their spells?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The 1 action is representative of a short amount of seconds that it takes to cast a spell. So a good way to think about this is that a full round of combat is 6 seconds long in a game of Dungeons & Dragons. So everything that happens, the fighter runs in and slashes somebody, and the ranger shoots a bow, and the wizard casts a spell, and the cleric comes in and casts Turn Undead, all that happens in 6 seconds, which is wild when you think about
that's crazy.
A spell that lasts a minute. That lasts 10 rounds in combat.
Wow.
Which is also why concentration is important, and rolling concentration checks should be a part of your game, etc. But the thing for you to keep in mind is if you're outside of combat, that spell takes anywhere from 1 second to 6 seconds to cast. And the way I like to think about it is that each person's turn doesn't take 6 seconds. Each person's turn actually only takes a couple of seconds. It only takes me 2 seconds to, sprint across the floor and slash at somebody with my sword. That doesn't even really take 6 seconds. It takes a smaller amount than that. So when you're casting spells, it could be really, a single second to cast a spell. The part I try to keep in mind is that keeping a spell hidden can be a real challenge. Casting a spell stealthily where somebody doesn't notice that you're casting a spell, I try to make that really situational. And I'm very flexible when it comes to spellcasters and what spells look like, etc. Even in the case of Antilife Shell, if somebody wanted to be like, yep, you can't really see it, it's just an invisible shell, but people can't pass through it. Generally, especially in combat, I'd probably let that fly just fine.
Yeah. Maybe if it catches the light, you might see a small glimmer.
Right, or something like that. Or you can see like kind of an outline on the ground as it like passes through the ground.
Oh yeah, because anything that is living is now pushed. So
right.
If there's a plant on the ground, does it push the plant?
I would say up until the point at which it like pushes against its roots. So it wouldn't push, say, a tree.
Okay.
Because that would be a forced movement. I also wouldn't make it end the spell.
Right, yeah, because that would be rude.
Right.
Okay, well, that's interesting, because it always gets a bit hazy for me when it says it costs an action and you're out of combat, but then you're like, okay, but you have to mark it. Like, it's not like it's a freebie. You don't get to just cast it because...
Sure, costing an action doesn't mean it doesn't cost a spell slot.
Right, yeah.
And so if you cast it outside of combat, it still would require you to use up
well,
a spell
okay,
slot.
but if we get into a combat, you're using this to go sit in your tent and have space.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Instead of what you really need it for later.
And I will say that I'm also pretty loose on spell slots. For the most part, I'm going to assume that you're tracking your own spell slots, and if you use this for a fun role-playing reason and not for any like particularly serious problem solving, then I probably wouldn't really count it.
Okay.
I might not say that explicitly, but at the end of the day, if you were like, oh man, I used up my 5th level spell doing that goofy thing in the camp where we made a joke about it, and I might be like, I'm not going to count that. You have a 5th level spell slot again.
Yeah. Okay, let's get into our Ask a GM last question. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
How do you make travel interesting without combat? Asks Slutherworldly Zero.
Ooh, good question, Slutherworldly Zero. So remember that Dungeons and Dragons, and really this is the case for most similar role-playing games, is made up of multiple components. Combat is just one of those many components. The other components are exploration and role-playing in most cases. The thing to keep in mind is that not every player wants combat. Lots of players want exploration. Lots of players want role-play as a part of that. The best ways to set up travel are more like a montage. It's really boring to say, you are traveling now for a week. Let me describe several things happening in your traveling for a week that you get no input on or that you get no decision making on. Montages are much more interesting when you can hand big pieces of it to the players. You say, you're traveling for a week through woods and a little bit of mountains. What do you do during that week? So you're traveling, you're on a cart or you're on a horse or you're walking the whole time. Are you talking about anything? Are you working on your knitting? What are you working on during this time?
Making more chainmail.
Sure, you're knitting yourself some extra chainmail. You're practicing your sword moves. You're sort of bringing out your sword and going ha hoo ha ha as you're walking along in the.
But not actually learning anything.
Just
saying that.
you're just practicing your sword grunts. The other thing that I really like to do, and you could hand that over to the players. This is a montage, and what this is it's going to be several scenes of what happens, a thing that happens on your journey. And you can let your players sort of dictate and determine a scene.
In a montage, you have to show improvement every single time.
That's true. In a true montage. In this case,
every scene you show a little improvement.
In this case, the only improvement that you need to show is that they have traveled successfully.
Okay.
Because it's a travel montage, so you're basically just showing you started in this place and now you're in a new place. So if you imagine the scenes, they should constantly be in new locations in the case that each scene happens. The other thing that I really like to do is I like to pair up and allow for role-playing scenes. And those really require that you give the players a clear prompt. You need to give them something that they can role-play on. Because if you just turn to the players and say, what do? You guys are all hanging out. Are you gonna talk to each other? The players won't know what to do with that. It's the same open space that the game master struggles with when they have, a big open world and nothing to put into it yet.
Yeah.
And so you need to give the players a really clear role-playing prompt in order to help them with that. You're all sitting on a cart, and each of you is going to share, at some point during this journey, a story about your past. What story do you share with the rest of the
So
party?
you're doing the end of the scene, let's role play it out,
Right.
but telling it in a different way.
Right.
Disguising it a little, that's good.
And if you've got players that are in for it, that are ready to roleplay, that are really excited for some of those opportunities, you might set up some other things. You might set up like, it seems like Jack and Jill.
We were saying Miranda.
Miranda, there you go. Jack and Miranda have a little bit of conflict. Because one of them believes that the mission that you're going on is about the money, and the other one believes that it's about saving the people and you should give the money back. And you can totally set up, we're going to role play that out a little bit in this journey that we're going on. And all the rest of your players, you're all here too. So you're hearing this argument. And if you want to chime in, you're welcome to do so. And now you can set up, here's an argument that we're going to have. And that can be really fun. Antagonistic relationships between characters can be really fun so long as you make it really clear that it's the characters that are having an argument and the players are not. But you really have to set up, these characters are going to have an argument. Are you two players okay having your characters have an argument and kind of playing out what that looks like? And make it clear what's the characters having an argument and what's not the players having an argument.
In that case, would you give them, you're going to end this argument by agreeing?
Not necessarily. Depends on the scene, right? And you might even pass that back to them. Does this scene end with both of you huffing off and maybe it's a poor choice of words, with both of you leaving in a huff, storming off.
Yeah, that's
there you go. And leaving frustrated with each other, having not resolved this, and maybe that's where the scene ends. Because in a story, that could totally be the case, right?
Totally.
Or does this scene end with you kind of coming to a resolution and finding a place where you are agreeing with each other? And again, that's, dictating the end of the scene before you start the scene,
right?
Which is it's just a technique that I'm such a big fan of and works so well.
It sounds like you do it without even thinking about it. Now you've done it so much.
I do that quite a bit, and the players at most of my tables are pretty used to it. I'll set up the scene, I'll set up the expectations of the scene, I'll set up the ending of the scene, and then we'll go, great, let's do it. And then usually what I do as the game master is I describe what's happening first. You're in a particularly quiet part of the journey. The birds are chirping overhead, and you can see that the road is pretty clear ahead of you. And something reminds you of the argument that you were having before.
See, and that kind of gets into what my tip was going to be. I really like to, and I put this at the top of all of my notes. Every single page has this on the top of all of my notes. It says the 5 senses. I want to describe the sight, the sounds, the smells, the tastes, how things feel. Anytime I have an opportunity to describe something, I want to be bringing it back to one of the 5 senses or more of the 5 senses. So if I were to say, okay, we are going to travel, we're going to talk about the travel, let's set up, it's raining and you are just soaked to the bone. You feel your boots sloshing with water. It's kind of aching on your toes as you walk, and you wish you would have gotten that cart from forever ago. And as you go, you can smell the ground. It actually smells amazing. So there's this moment of beauty in here. You're tasting the sweat. You smell a campfire up ahead. Like always bringing it back to the 5 senses. That helps me with any sort of description. But you can take it a step further because you can ask the players, what does that smell like? What does that remind you of? What is that? You go into it further with them and let them fill it out for you. I like to add in a skill check when I'm traveling. I like to say, like, you guys, you're lost. You don't know where you're going to go. There's a really tall tree. Are you going to climb it? And then it's a skill check. Make a strength roll, make an acrobatics, make a whatever, just to add in a little bit of dice rolling in a long stretch of session where there might not be.
I'll also do that sometimes in travel. If the travel is going to be hard, if we're sailing on a ship and there's a storm, I might add in a skill challenge or something, which is a series of skill checks that that help to determine some of the result. And the end result of a skill challenge is always that you still travel. You still wind up in the destination that you were trying to get to, but the difference might be like you wind up in the destination and you all feel pretty good and you've successfully navigated that storm, or you're all run ragged and exhausted.
You're puking off the side of the ship.
Puking off the side of the ship, and your ship is nearly destroyed, and you're pulling into the harbor with your ship sinks into the water.
Exactly. There's still an element of this is a game, and you have options and choices. And should you fail a skill challenge while you're traveling, you're still going to make it, and you're going to be alive, but, you'd be surprised what you could live through.
Right. And I think that also can be a really interesting way to fill out. We're talking about, like, role-playing is one, exploration is the other one. If you're going to travel, add challenges into the exploration. And that could be, the bridge is out. You need to cross a big canyon, and you have no bridge, and, a whole stop and do it puzzle. But it could also be that you're sailing on a ship, that you're climbing a difficult mountain pass. Let's roll some checks to see how well you can do that.
Or you're trying to make an NPC laugh.
Yeah.
A serious NPC, and you need to make them laugh because you're bored.
So I definitely think that thinking about the travel, and in this case, I'm going to kind of assume that you don't want the travel to trail off into its own campaign, its whole own separate story. Because often that's the case, right? We are here, we need to get to the castle over there where the evil necromancer king sits, and it takes us a week to get there. I don't want to do a whole side story.
Right. You see a homeless person running, like there's bees chasing them, and they're not, and they're completely naked.
Right.
Suddenly we're going to go off and help that person.
Suddenly there's some other storyline or something. So I want to avoid that. But I still want to have something interesting happen along the way that's not necessarily I'm fighting another swarm of bees.
Swarms.
Yeah, exactly.
Wonderful. Well, I think that about does it for this episode of The Next Session. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Remember that you can contact us. You can go to the website at nextsessionpodcast.com and submit a question. We would love to have your questions to answer on air. You can also contact us on Twitter or Facebook at The Next Session. I'm Adam Johns.
And I'm Alyssa Johns.
Tune in next time and we'll help you prep for your next session.